Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome to Liberty Mail. I'm Katie Kenline. I'm here with our co-host, Grace Riley. We're coming to you live from the underground studio at Grove City College for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. Thank you for joining us for episode 2 of season 3.
We're so happy to have you. Thank you for listening, and please hit the like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, and follow us if you're listening on any other podcast platform.
Today, we are recapping last week's second GOP debate that was held at the Reagan Presidential Library in California. The location of this debate turned into a pretty big central theme for the party and for Fox. A lot of candidates were using lots of Reagan quotes and alluding to the late president. I love Reagan quotes. I know we've talked about it. President Reagan is an icon. But this is an interesting moment we're in now, and some things just felt a little off. This moment feels a little bit different. I'll say now, we both didn't love this debate. There was very little from this that we loved. But the encouragement I have for us all to remember as we go through this episode is Hebrews 13:4, for here we have no lasting city, but we're seeking the city which is to come, because, man, things seem like a train wreck sometimes. There's a lot happening around us right now, unfortunately, on both sides. The government almost shutting down. This morning, we see Senator Feinstein passes away. Gavin Newsom says that he's only going to look for a black woman to appoint. He appoints LaFonza Butler. Today, we find out she's registered to vote in Maryland, and she owns property in Maryland and California. But, what's going on? Everything seems to be falling apart. Representative Gates is filing a motion to vacate for McCarthy. There's so much drama. President Trump isn't at the debate. Today, he's in Manhattan on trial with his family, too, but we see nothing about the Biden family. And there are federal gun charges against Hunter Biden, but there's no trial for them. So here we are. Grace, what are your thoughts?
No, as you said, it's all pretty crazy. And a lot of this at the time that we're recording, so you'll hear it a bit later. But looking at all of the things unfolding, I mean, for Newsom, that wasn't very surprising. He followed through on his word, and as most people think, that makes no sense. You shouldn't be appointing someone based on the characteristics of race and gender. Most people should agree on that. I don't know why that's something that we're debating. I don't think those should be the qualifications, but I guess he does. So that's interesting. And as you said, we both didn't love the debate. And I actually haven't heard anyone say that they thought it went really well. I really haven't heard anyone come out and think that it was a good look for the GOP or a good look for candidates. Mm-hmm. It really just, I think, was a mess altogether for a lot of different reasons that we're going to break down today. And interestingly enough, though, I want to point out, most people aren't getting their news from traditional media or television anymore, at least in the younger generation. So I also think it's interesting to consider, will these debates aired on TV play as much of a role as they have in the past? I don't think that they'll play as big of a role, or at least it'll be somewhat of a different role, because with each candidate having direct access to their constituents online and being able to put out statements pretty constantly and easily and quickly, it kind of changes the game where they're able to create their platforms. But obviously this format where they're talking back and forth and answering questions and debating each other is still important.
And that's a good point. And maybe that's why we start to see candidates almost talking and talking points that can be clipped for social media, clipped for short videos. What were some of the best or craziest clipped parts that we have now circulating all over?
Yeah, and that is true. And you can notice that if you watch the debate, that it's changed a lot in the sense of candidates are concerned with how they're going to be clipped. And obviously in politics, there's always a concern of how you're going to be quoted. So there's always that thought in a politician's mind. But it definitely is different now that they're looking for their clips to be clipped, go viral in positive ways. But some of these clips, most of them actually went viral in negative ways. The first one that I'll bring up, actually, because of the way it was clipped. So DeSantis decided to go after Trump. And what happened was he basically said, and this happened in the middle of the debate, but he basically made a comment saying that Trump was to blame for the debt and certain parts of the debt. And basically the point is he was attacking Trump, saying that Trump was MIA, saying, I don't know where Trump is. He's MIA. He should be on this debate stage. And then, of course, what happened was the Biden campaign took that clip of DeSantis, posted it, and said, I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message. So that's also what happens. And whenever that clip aired, and throughout the whole debate, when candidates started to attack Trump and criticize him for not being there, one thing that I did think of was all of the division, because the whole entire debate was basically a lot of the candidates yelling at each other, talking over each other. It was chaotic. It was chaos where it was hard to hear coherent, deep points that were going to be impactful and important. And with all of the candidates just attacking each other, trying to get their one-liners in, trying to get clips for social media, it made it really hard to have it be a meaningful debate where you really heard about issues in a constructive way. And also, I think that the division, and this is just one example of it, is really unhelpful for Republicans. It really is. It's unhelpful. Obviously, there's a time and place to call out the people that these candidates are running against. So to call out the fellow Republicans that are trying to win the primary, there's a time and place to, of course, they should be disagreeing and calling each other out. But I think that the attitude surrounding it is a lot more divisive than it should be.
And to that point too, there were some points where you couldn't hear what anyone was saying. Three people are talking over each other. As a funny note, I was watching this because I have a Spanish minor. I was watching this on Univision because they're live streaming it there. It's like, oh, this will be funny, right? Because it's translated over, and this is like, oh, fun way for me to learn. I cannot imagine for anyone in this country who English is their second language trying to listen to three people literally talk over each other
and
at once.
Fighting with the moderators.
We can't hear anything. It was funny. The translators are all translating over each other because this is absolute chaos. It doesn't follow any format that helps anyone learn anything. Yeah, were there any other, just like you said, one-liners that were just like, what's going on?
There were a few one-liners that people laughed at on social media. One was Governor Chris Christie trying to paint Donald Trump as Donald Duck. So he made this one-liner comment saying that Donald Trump should now be called Donald Duck. Now, people didn't really find this funny. It was kind of a hit and a miss. He tried to, I guess, do what Trump does in a sense with the nicknames, but I don't really think it worked. And in the end, I think it hurt him more than it helped him. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but another one I'll just add on top of it, because this is another quick one. Yeah. Nikki Haley versus Vivek. She made this comment, which definitely went viral and people were focused on. She said, honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber. So saying that didn't work in her favor either, I don't think. I think it was unhelpful and it didn't come across well.
And a lot of these felt very prepped. Like you saw her almost take that moment and look at him and say, okay, here's my time to deliver this zinger. Later, Vivek saying, we got to seal the Swiss cheese of a southern border. I mean, things that are like, we're trying to be funny, but really, really missing the point. There's this swinging from being really, really, these are serious issues impacting American families. And then what are we talking about with some of these jokes?
Yeah, it was clearly, it seemed like political gymnastics, Olympics, where it was basically just all very politicized, where candidates were more concerned with politically attacking each other and having these one-liners than really, again, discussing these meaningful ideas. And I guess to their credit, in one sense, I think one of the reasons could have been the format of the debate. There were way too many candidates on stage. The questions were not helpful either. We can talk a bit more about the questions, but the questions, if you want to share a little bit more about them, the questions kind of set this debate up to go the way it did.
Yes, well, and I know there's one that especially bothered you. The one that bothered me the most was the question from one of the moderators saying, we were talking about, the moderators started acknowledging talking points from the left. They started acknowledging these almost as truth and saying, well, how would you defend this from the right? Which really, I think to the voter rubs us the wrong way. No, half of the country doesn't believe this is true, what you're saying. So the moderator says, the richest 1% now own 1/5 of the income what do you think? Basically asking, what do you think about income inequality in the United States? This is like 8 years ago. This was a Bernie Sanders talking point to be like the top 1%. Why are we giving platform to things that are just far left ideas and talking points that they've chosen to use? And then there were some other questions that also gave into the left's talking points.
There were. And one of those would have been to DeSantis referencing slavery. And again, really, you explained it really well. That I think covers the whole thing pretty much. That a lot of the questions, and if you go and watch the debate, or if you have seen the debate, we're doing this episode so that you don't have to. You can hear all of the highlights from us. But if you go and watch the debate, you'll notice that a lot of the questions, they were framed upon, yes, as you've explained, leftist talking points, some which were false. So that really was interesting and definitely had something to do with how it ended up going. But yes, there was just constant overlap in talking. The whole thing was really just chaotic. And I don't think it helped any of the candidates move up or even come close to catching up to Trump or bridging the gap that they would have needed to coming out of this debate. Because right now, Trump is leading in the polls about 60 points ahead of the other candidates. That's about 60 points ahead of DeSantis, who's in second right now. So that's a big gap. And this debate, it didn't seem to help any of the people who were there really bridge that gap. But before moving on, one of the things we wanted to address too was Trump wrong for skipping the debate? Because a lot of people have expressed disappointment that he skipped the debate. That was part of the reason that he was called MIA on the stage. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing. Did we take anything away from this debate? Did any of this help us know more about the candidates? I don't know. When people start to just talk in talking points, it's like, is this real? Maybe my trust goes down when it starts to be really obvious that people are just using talking points. If he was on that stage, what would we have gotten? What would we have seen? I think there could be more chaos with other candidates attacking him. They clearly, many of them went after him, even though he wasn't there. Nikki Haley kind of going against his record, and like the president didn't stop this. He didn't stop this. He didn't, talking about China and fentanyl and China buying American farmland. I don't know what would have. They got their chance still to attack him. He just wasn't there. I don't know. Honestly, it kind of proves his point. The more and more chaos that happens when he's not there, it proves his point. This is why I'm out campaigning. I'm out talking to American people. I'm out.
I think I completely agree, and I think that that's a great point. I think that, and a lot of people actually agree with this, the Daily Mail reported a poll the day following the debate saying that Trump actually was the winner of the debate. So people had voted in this poll and found Trump the winner of the debate, even though he wasn't there. And that says a lot, and I agree, the reason being, as you said, a lot of this just hurt the candidates who were there. And yes, by him not being there, he looked a lot better because of how chaotic it was on the stage, especially being how far ahead he was. For his campaign, it makes sense that they would have made the decision to avoid the circus, in a sense, that it ended up being. Now, people also think that he should have been there just because he should have had to answer questions, and people had called him MIA. I didn't really think he was MIA, and I don't think anyone thinks he's hiding from anything. I don't think he comes across as someone who's scared of questions. He takes plenty of them, and he goes at them on the offense. And while this was happening, he was holding his own rally in Michigan where he was on the ground with voters, communicating directly with them. And he's been doing that this whole time. So he's been out and about. He's been addressing the issues that the American people actually care about. And he's been doing so in a way where it wasn't these short one-liner talking points out of context and whatnot, where he can just give his long-form platform in a sense. And it's not to say the other candidates haven't been doing that too in their campaigning, but there is something to be said for the fact that the way that this went and him deciding not to go and saying and making clear, this is why I'm not going, it kind of seems to be proving itself.
Well, and that's the thing I think about. So back in 2015, the fall of 2015, this is 8 years ago, I fell in love with politics after watching the second Republican debate that was at the Reagan Presidential Library. And even since then, it seems like an entirely different world. After that debate, that was where Carly Fiorina really went after Donald Trump. That was when we had Marco Rubio up there too, Ted Cruz. And people's poll numbers were actually influenced by the debate. Carly Fiorina was, if I remember correctly, either like very, very close to or polling above President Trump in some polls after this debate. That's like the debates had more of a sway and influence, and it was different form. I don't think we saw this 3-4 people talking over each other at one time. I think we're in a different, it goes back to that. This moment is very different, unfortunately.
Yes, it is very different, which is important to acknowledge. And I also was very intrigued by that debate back then, and it's one of the things that drove me into getting involved in politics more and in inspiring me to look into issues more and be more informed just as a citizen. And it was a lot different than what we just saw. Totally different. And also, again, obviously the game is different because right now Trump is leading by so much. And interestingly, CNN just reported that polls show that the last time a president was the front runner and had this much of a primary lead, he became the nominee. So that's led other people to question, why are we even having the debates if the front runner who's leading by that much isn't there? And I think there is something to go to that. And the other thing that I think is interesting is back in 2016, also at that time when they were running, Americans seemed pretty happy with the candidates, at least more so. They seemed all right. But now it seems like everyone's disappointed for the most part, or a good amount of people are disappointed with who's running. A lot of people thought all the candidates weren't that great. And it's just a big shift even in how Americans are looking at the candidates who are running.
Well, and it's like we wonder if, can we trust them? Do we know what people are saying? Is this true? The last thing that I'll say that's really interesting is many of the people who are standing on stage attacking government spending and blaming a lot of the problems on Washington. How do we know that when they get there that they're going to be able to fix it? How do we know that the party's going to be able to unite behind any of the candidates running? How do we? It's interesting. Governor DeSantis really went after Congress and government spending, and he said they borrowed, they printed, they spent money. Now you're paying for everything. He was in Congress from 2013 to 2018. He was there. It's very interesting. How do we? Vivek, he has some really good talking points that sound very good, but do we trust him? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a different moment that we're living in
and
now.
That's completely how I feel. I think, and let's talk about too, we want to talk about some of the good things that happened, and Katie's going to lead into this, some of the good things that the candidates said. Overall, it was a bit chaotic, but obviously there were still parts where people got good points across, and I completely agree. There are some people that have great talking points, but it is going to come to more of that with trust.
Yeah. So there are some good things that are out there that I think that leading into the election that GOP candidates need to continue to run with, the attacks against China and acknowledging that China is one of our greatest adversaries right now, because we've talked about part of this is who do we trust with foreign policy and who do we trust is going to represent America on the world stage well. Our president right now is not.
Yeah, that's also one of the things where it blows my mind that people, at least in our generation especially, aren't more concerned with foreign policy when they're looking at a candidate. It's crazy to me because I think looking at the world, especially where we are now, especially where we are after the damage that President Biden has caused in that way, I think that should be a really top priority in looking at a candidate.
So we had former Vice President Pence. He had a good quote about Joe Biden's Green New Deal policies are good for Beijing and bad for Detroit. That was good to put out there. Nikki Haley talked about how the president and the candidate on the right needs to acknowledge and fight against China buying farmland, killing Americans with fentanyl, She was talking about the spy base off of our coast in Cuba from China. So I think that was a strong point. Overall, they had this. There's a trend here that they all seem to have some good attacks against China, and I'm glad they acknowledge that. Governor Burgum from North Dakota, he was talking about subsidies for vehicles, and that we have all these subsidies for electric vehicles, but then in the United States, we're encouraging people to buy them, but the batteries only come from where the lithium comes from China. There's some, I would say, sketchy labor practices surrounding that we should be wary of as well. But so I did like that the candidates went after China and talked about that. But again, who do we trust on the world stage to represent the United States in terms of foreign policy? I don't know which candidate at this point.
Yeah, and there were also some good things on the border and that issue. So there definitely were parts. I think it especially started off better than it ended in a sense. When the debate started, it wasn't that bad. It's just whenever it kept getting worse.
Maybe they shouldn't be 2 hours. It just continues to go on, and people start to realize, I got to get this talking point in. Yeah, but we'll see if there's even a third debate, because that's, again, the Trump campaign calling to not have a third debate because what do we do if the leading candidate's missing from the stage?
And that is a valid question, whether people like Trump, don't like Trump, like the other candidates, don't. No matter what, it is an interesting question. Just look at the facts of the polls and who's leading, the gap there, what another debate would mean, especially if the leading candidate isn't there. It is really interesting to look at and kind of see. I guess we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens. I know that Governor Ron DeSantis just asked Trump to do a debate. I don't know if that will happen. We'll have to see. But
yeah, we're just looking toward Iowa and New Hampshire this late winter, early spring. That's where we'll start to see which candidates are in the lead. And I don't know if anything's really going to change because of debates or not.
Yes, and we will continue to see, and again, we'll see how big of an impact these debates have. But for today's episode, we're out of time. We're so happy that you joined us and listened for this conversation, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Our episodes will be coming out each Thursday, and please like and subscribe, whether it's on podcast platforms and you can follow, or YouTube where you subscribe. Just stay up to date with us, and then you'll be able to be updated on when our latest videos and podcasts come out. So thank you so much for listening.
For more information on the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.